Welcome to another edition of A Voice to the Gentile Church. I'm Jim Wingerter, and next to me is Pastor Roger Diaz. Next to him is Dolores Lowe. Contrary to all appearances, we did not send out a black shirt memo today. But here we are, all wearing black shirts.
I just realized that.
So there was a very ugly scene that occurred this week. A sick person, I don't even want to say a psychopath because there's reasons for why he did what he did, right?
Right.
So a sick person drove into a parade and mowed down people.
Right.
And if you haven't heard that on the news yet, you're living in a box. So who is this guy and what's he all about?
So his name is Daryl Brooks. He's a career criminal, been in and out of jail, committed crime after crime since he was 17 years old. So he's 39 now. So for 22 years, he has been committing crimes. And the liberal...
That's that we know of. He probably was a criminal and under the juvenile system previously.
True. Absolutely true.
Yeah.
So basically, he's been in that rotating door, right, where they let him. His latest crime.
And they rotated the door last week.
Yep. His latest crime right before this one was he attempted to kill a woman, and for that they put him out on $1,000.
He's the mother
bail.
of his child.
Yeah. $1,000 bail. So. I don't know what to say. You know, it's been Wisconsin. It's had liberal DAs forever, and they believe, they think they're rehabbing people, right? After 22 years of committing crimes, they're still thinking they're going to rehab this guy. And they let him out on $1,000 bail, and now he injured 40 people and killed 6. Now, why did he do that?
Yeah. So
he happens to be a member of a group called the 5% Nation, which is a subset of the Nation of Islam. So he's kind of as much as we can say the Nation of Islam he's Muslim, right? The 5% Nation believes that 85% of the people in the world are just, clueless. They don't know anything. And then 10% are the rich who are in charge of everything and are enslaving everybody else and are teaching them wrong about God. And then the remaining 5%, which is the 5% Nation, are the true believers in God, the true people who come to the world to teach justice and everything else, and they all happen to be black. Only black people can be that 5%.
The question is, am I included in the 85% or the 10%?
So you would be, so that's the question.
Somewhere
right?
between the 85 and the 10.
We're not rich, but we are believers in Christ.
And we're propagating
the faith in Christ as the Messiah, right? So we kind of fall into that 10%, even though we're not rich.
Right.
So
we're not amongst the clueless.
Right.
So this 5% movement, they're called the 5%ers or something?
The 5% Nation.
5% Nation. How prevalent is that movement?
It's an offshoot of the Nation of Islam.
Membership?
It started in the same mosque that Elijah Muhammad was, I guess, Iman, I guess is what we would call him. That's where that movement started.
And Jim, you said something about a connection to
right. So I'm having
Hebrew
trouble.
Israelite movement.
I'm having trouble connecting these. So in the New York Post today, they stated that in 2015 he shared a disturbing anti-Semitic meme that appeared to align with the beliefs of the black Hebrew Israelites. Mm-hmm. So how do they connect with Islam?
We've talked about them on the program before.
Right.
I've done, I think, sufficient research on them to know how they connect. Elijah Muhammad was essentially the first public speaker, public figure to come out with that statement that the people of Africa are actually the sons of Judah. They were actually the Jews. He's the first person to really propagate that. There may have been people before him, but he's the most recent famous person to come out with those statements. And that statement has resonated throughout the minority community ever since. It's hooked on to the the most critical aspect of the young male black community, the radicals, the ones who would see themselves as needing to make a change. In the 70s, it was the Black Panthers and so on. So Elijah Muhammad has always resonated with that particular group of African Americans. And it's no surprise that it's linked to the Nation of Islam because of that.
Okay.
But in the last 5 or 10 years, the Hebrew Israelite movement has been gaining momentum, and we've talked about them before.
Mm-hmm.
And they are loosely connected to the Nation of Islam, or I guess the 5% nation. And so the question is, this person, Daryl Brooks is his name?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Daryl Brooks. Did he act out the way he did in Wisconsin as a result of vengeance? Did he act out vengefully?
So
of course, we're not going to find out from the media,
Right.
because they're already playing it down.
Right. There's actual reports that CNN is whitening his image every time they
Really?
post it.
They've done that before, right?
Yeah. His Facebook page has been taken down. His YouTube page has been taken down. But there is an archive of some of his stuff, and he is an admitted child sex offender.
Okay.
Because there's a video of him admitting that he had sex with a 16-year-old. And basically, in my book, it would have been rape.
It's statutory rape, even if
Exactly.
she's consenting.
Right. And he has a lot of anti-police postings, a lot of George Floyd stuff. Then he has some Hitler's a great guy type of postings.
So more than likely, he was responding to the acquittal of Kyle Rittenhouse.
Right.
The media doesn't want to touch this.
Well,
of
they
course.
created it, right? They created that problem.
Right. So, okay, so we understand why the media would not want to interfere with this. In fact, maybe that's something we can discuss. Why do you think CNN and MSNBC, ABC,
NBC, CBS.
trying to deflect away from the possibility that this is about retribution? I mean, it's obvious it's about retribution to me. It seems pretty obvious, but why would the media?
I think they have the president that they want, and I think they don't want to inflame a situation that, frankly, they promoted, they created.
Okay, so the Kyle Rittenhouse case is the most documented case on the face of the earth, right? We have video of what happened from every possible angle.
And the most lied about case.
Right, and the
as
most
a matter
lied
of fact,
about case,
yeah.
right? And the media created that whole environment, right? They lied about his taking the gun across state lines. They lied about the fact that his grandparents lived right near where things were going bad.
And that he was protecting his grandfather's
Exactly.
business.
They just lied about everything left and right. They created this situation where...
I heard on Facebook that his mother drove him and the rifle with her to the event, which was not true.
Right. I mean, they have been lying left and right from the beginning. They knew exactly what this case was about.
And now in the case with
Daryl.
Daryl Brooks, they're not lying, but they're hiding
Right.
what is obvious.
Right.
Right.
So
Well, it's
obviously,
obvious to us. I don't know that it's obvious to the world out there.
So let's look at things. Last
we're
week,
the 5%.
yes. Last week, Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted in a case that was clearly self-defense.
Right.
Today, the people who killed Ahmaud Arbery were found guilty. Therefore, the system works.
Right.
That's good.
Right.
That's good.
Because there's no question that Ahmaud Arbery should not have been killed, right?
Right.
That it was just plain
Right.
murder.
Right.
And
No.
the system worked. They found, in the case that it was self-defense, they found self-defense. In the case that it was murder, they found murder.
Absolutely.
But the media has the narrative that they want to give, right?
Get the
Right.
sense that the media would have preferred a not guilty verdict, but you see, the media is stoking the flames of racism in this country, and it's part of their agenda. Now, is this happening in a vacuum? We have most of the media outlets are operating in synchronicity, almost,
They are.
in perfect accord in regards to their agenda to stoke the flames of racism. What does that tell us? That the impetus for this is coming from a much higher place. In
Yeah.
other words, the boardroom at CNN and MSNBC, they're linked together by a governing body. And what's happening? Who is this governing body, and why are they trying to stoke the flames of racism again? That almost came to an end in the 1990s.
Right.
In the early 2000s, there was virtually no or very little remnants of racism, but now it's peaking again. Who are the entities, or the entity? Who is the entity that's doing this? No, I have ideas, but I'm not going to just come right out and speculate like that. Obviously, someone is trying to divide the American people.
Right.
And bring upon the American people a condition or conditions under which we will fail as a nation.
Right.
Obviously.
Right, because as long as America is a superpower, we're an impediment.
Yeah.
Because we're not the superpower that's going to behave. If we are acting how America normally acts, we're not the superpower they want.
So, Jim, you see a conspiracy here.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What percentage are the conspiracists?
Oh, I no longer call people conspiracy
That's on a different
theorists.
scale.
It
That's
all
on a
comes
different
through
scale.
now, right? Now it all, what was a conspiracy yesterday, tomorrow we find out is a truth.
It's
So
crazy times that we live in. Wow.
It's unfortunate that people die for them to make their gains.
exactly, yeah. We had the case just yesterday. The president was giving a speech. He stuck to that teleprompter so close that he read, end of quote. Because somebody is telling him exactly what to say. When Kyle Rittenhouse was first acquitted, he was positive towards that. Within 24 hours, he had totally switched. Why? Because the people behind him were telling him, you can't say that, you got to say this.
Right.
He's just a puppet.
Yeah.
His handlers are
And-
busy.
And it is a shame because they, on the one hand, they are telling minorities, because they're trying to do this to Hispanics, every minority, they started with the Asians, right? Every minority they can think of, they're telling them, you're being oppressed by the evil white person, right? And then you go to school, and under CRT, they tell them, you're not good enough, so we have to make it easy on you. So the poor person, the poor minority is stuck in the middle. He will never be good enough, and he will always be oppressed.
Well, as a minority myself, I choose to be free.
Exactly.
To be a free thinker and to liberate myself from the media and from this movement in this country that's purposely trying to divide the country. I reminisce concerning the 1990s and even the 80s when race began to evaporate, the race issue began to evaporate. We were a better country.
Yep.
Now, there was always underlying tenets of racism, and there was always that, but things were getting better.
Well, the sad thing is, the one place where racism had totally been removed is in the United States military, right? It was at a point where it doesn't matter what color you are.
Especially if somebody's shooting at you.
Exactly. But now they've introduced all this wokeness. You got General Milley being who knows what, the Secretary of Defense saying you knows what, and doing what is basically CRT within the military. So where there was no division, they're now creating division. Because if you have a military that isn't united, as we all know, unity is the strongest power on the planet, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question I have for you guys and for our viewers is, if in fact what Mr. Brooks did, Darrell Brooks did, is associated or connected to his association with the 5%ers, and it was in fact done for the purpose of vengeance, shouldn't the American people know this?
Yes, they should.
Should we not know that this was his motivation, and he murdered those people, and when he drove through that crowd, he intended to murder and to slay many more than what he accomplished to do. So as far as he was concerned, he was going to kill 50 people.
Yep.
Is it all for the purpose of vengeance? And if it is, we need to know this. I see no effort on the part of our authorities to stop the gross racism that's motivating these people.
On top of that, there's no respect for the judicial system
Right.
and for a jury
Right.
that sat there for weeks listening to testimonies and
Yep.
made a decision, made the best decision that they could make with the evidence that was presented to them.
Right.
We're tinkering with the fabric of our society that can lead to a major eruption. A major eruption, something that I guess this is the purpose of the puppeteers that are behind the whole narrative. It's very unfortunate where we are, but
You know,
I guess
the-
Fox is trying to treat this from a level-headed
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, but the others aren't. You
Yeah.
know, the sad thing is like the sixth person who died today was a 6-year-old boy.
6-year-old boy.
8 years old.
8 years old, 8-year-old boy. His brother was also hit. So here's a family going into the holidays with one child in the hospital who
And
was
one
also,
child dead.
and one child dead.
Yeah.
But do you think that they care? No.
Hatred,
Nothing about this administration says they care about the American people.
Hatred breeds hatred. And we can only pray that those families would learn to, or will choose to forgive and hope for a better America.
Yeah.
But if this continues, it will no longer be an issue of forgiving and choosing to be compassionate. It would be an issue of civil
That's
unrest.
exactly what they're aiming for, right? Everything that this administration is doing is to cause division.
To
you know,
create civil unrest.
Right. This week, the FBI raided the home of a mother whose only failure was to go to a school board meeting and speak at a school board meeting.
Yeah.
So the FBI raided her home. This week, we released oil reserves, our oil reserves. You'd think the oil would be going to us, right? Because it's our strategic oil reserve,
There's
right?
a bigger story here, isn't there? I mean, we're saying we're intending to drive down the cost of oil, but if OPEC keeps raising the price, then it may level for a short time.
Well, and we released our reserves, and
To
we
whom?
gave the oil to India and China,
Yeah.
not to the U.S. And it's a strategic oil reserve for a reason.
Right.
Should war break out, we need that oil.
Right. So we're
So-
saying we don't see oil, we don't see war on the horizon. Why is OPEC continuing to not supply with more oil to the market? And an answer might lie there with the reality that they know that when the oil's gone, they're dead men.
It's you know, and anyone who says that they don't see, I have a friend who has a countdown clock about when China is going to invade Taiwan and when all hell will break loose. Because if China invades Taiwan, there's going to be, the entire region's going to have issues, right? And we're not
Sure.
going to be able to stay out of it.
Right.
So I don't know what to tell you. It is just absolutely depressing. And to have people in power who basically want to destroy the country. And this isn't a liberal or conservative or a left or right thing, okay? Because I can understand you're gonna be a liberal, that's okay. You have a different perspective than I do. But that isn't the case here. It's now at a point that all they care about is destroying the nation.
It's a communist agenda.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the days of the McCarthyism and
Yep.
so on. These were the things that were troubling the people that were looking for communists, that ultimately they'll come to this place where they would literally destroy the country.
Yep.
And so here we are, and many of the people in the Biden administration are known professing communists.
Yep.
And so here we are.
Yep.
We're seeing it. We're seeing the demise of the country at the hands of the communists.
Yep.
So, very depressing. Is there
Yep.
anything that's
Well,
positive?
we could be driving down the road fast and hard toward Armageddon.
That's true.
Is there any? It's Thanksgiving tomorrow.
Yes, it is. It is.
That's good.
I did have a friend email me this week, and he said how, as bad as things are, how blessed he felt that he might see the end times.
That's a perspective, and not many people would gravitate to that perspective, but it is a good perspective.
Well, it could be pretty rough for a while.
Yep.
Yeah, we understand that. We've been talking about this on this program for 10 years, and it's
Yeah.
surreal. It is ultra surreal to come to that place where, wow, it's actually unfolding right before us.
Right.
And the world is
That's true.
oblivious. You know, the world is existing in blissful blindness. Willfully blinded and happy at being willfully blinded.
So our question relates to prophetic things that are yet to come.
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of in the same respect. So the question of the day is, why are the books of the Maccabees not included in the Bible?
All right.
I
think-
made that plural because there's 4
Yeah.
books of the Maccabees.
There are 4 books. But just off the top of my head, I think that the only book that's really relevant to me is First Maccabee, Maccabee
Right.
1. The other 3 books gives a lot of historical background and so on. But the only book that really speaks to me on any level of spirituality or allegorical pictures there, it would be the first book, Maccabee 1. All right, let's talk about why the books were excluded from the Bible.
Sure.
Well, it's a very simple answer. The whole story of the Maccabees occurred during the intertestamental period. That's a multi-syllable
It
word.
is.
During the intertestamental period, that's the period of time from Malachi to effectively Jesus, right? About roughly 400 years. That's the intertestament period. So this story occurred then. So naturally, it was not included in the Masoretic text.
Right.
What was the Masoretic text? The Masoretic text was the Hebrew, what we know as the Old Testament, the Tanakh.
Right.
The Hebrew Tanakh, written in Hebrew. So written in Hebrew and not in Greek. Now, some time went by, and then the Greek Septuagint came into the picture. In the Greek Septuagint, the Apocrypha or the apocryphal books were then included into, like the Book of Enoch and all those other
Right.
books were included into the Septuagint, which effectively became sort of the Christian Bible, right? The Jewish rabbinate and the Jewish leadership, scholarship refused to embrace, of course, the Septuagint, and they kept with what's called the Tanakh, which is the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim, which is the 3 aspects or 3 divisions of the Tanakh. And that's really Torah, the teachings, Nevi'im, the prophets, and Ketuvim, which is the writings, the Psalms and the Chronicles and so on. And so they didn't, the Jewish scholarship of the 1st and 2nd century did not accept the Septuagint. They just sort of stayed with the Tanakh, which was the Masoretic text. And so for that reason, we don't have the book of Maccabees in the Tanakh. Now, the book of Maccabees is considered a historical text by the Jewish people. Jewish scholarship has always seen it as just that, a historic book. Very useful, very relevant to their celebration of Hanukkah, of course, because Hanukkah is centered, if you're not aware of this, Hanukkah is centered around the story of the Maccabees. We'll talk a little bit about who the Maccabees were. We're not going to get too in-depth into the story of the Maccabees, but we're just going to brush across this to the extent that you'd understand. So here we have it. The Septuagint, the Greek Septuagint included the book of Maccabees. Now, rejected by Israel, accepted by early Christians, the history of Christianity, all the way up to Martin Luther and the Reformation, included the book of Maccabees.
Right.
Sometimes we think it was just the Roman Catholics, but no, most Orthodox movements of that century and a half or so, millennia and a half, did in fact consider the book of Maccabees as inspirational. What was the inspirational?
It is.
My Catholic Bible
Yeah.
has the book of Maccabees.
And listen, we have to come to terms with this. Until the Reformation, most Christians, anti-Orthodox Christians even, Christians like us, we saw the book of Maccabees as inspirational.
Right.
And the key to the inspiration of the book of Maccabees was in fact that you had a group of people that was standing against a singular oppressive figure. And they saw that singular oppressive figure, who was, of course, Antiochus Epiphanes, as an Antichrist figure. They saw him that way. Now, I'm talking about all of Christianity, by and large, saw the book of Maccabees in that light.
Okay.
And so that was inspirational. It was pointing, perhaps in their minds, to a time when there would be persecution upon the church, and there would be this Antichrist-type figure who would oppress, but inspiration came where the Maccabees refused to surrender. There was a story of Hannah, who had, I think, 6 sons, and all of the 6 sons choose martyrdom rather than to sacrifice pigs and to eat swine's flesh. And Hannah did the same. So this woman, Hannah, and the Maccabees were all viewed in ancient Christianity as heroes because they stood against this one oppressive figure. Now, early Christianity, I'm talking about Christianity before Nicaea, and even after Nicaea, they saw the emperor, whoever the emperor was at the time, as Antiochus Epiphanes, or a type of Antiochus Epiphanes. And I think they were right. And we'll talk about that here shortly. So what happened with the Reformation, with Martin Luther? Well, Martin Luther comes along, and he has a real issue with salvation by works versus salvation by faith. Right? He had a real, that was his mega pet peeve, right? And so anything that resembled the old structure with, Catholicism, he went to the other side of the spectrum. If this is where Catholicism was on just about every issue, he swung all the way over to the other side of the issue. So, no, Martin Luther was correct. Justification is by faith only, and of course, leads to salvation, of course. So the Orthodox movements were saying something entirely different. But we have to understand that Martin Luther and his movement was not the only movement that held to the position of justification by faith.
Right.
There were many others who did throughout the history of Christianity who were oppressed into oblivion.
Right.
Many, many more. The difference with Martin Luther is that he had a platform. He was a monk. He was, I'm not sure what order he was a part of. I don't think he was a Dominican, but he was a monk.
He was German.
Probably Franciscan or something. Yeah. Anyway, so, and he had that platform, and when he took his essay and nailed it to the door of that cathedral, the environment at that time was in Hamburg, was it? Yeah, Hamburg?
No, the door.
Wiccan.
It wasn't Berlin.
I usually have it on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah,
Württemberg?
No, Gutenberg's.
It'll come.
Right.
So when he did that, he struck a very heavy chord in the Christian community, and he was able to effect the Reformation. But there's been people with Reformation ideas concerning every aspect of what the church was doing way before him. But the truth is, most Christians accepted the story of the Maccabees. Again, it was inspirational. It had a prophetic tone to it. Martin Luther said, if it's something that the Catholic embraces, I'm not embracing it. So effectively, when the Protestant Bible was put together, the 1611 Bible that became the King James and so on, it was purposely left out. And I say it, I mean the book of Maccabees, purposely left out because it was something that the Catholics subscribed to. So because of the Catholics, the Orthodox adherence to the Apocrypha, the book of Maccabees, the Protestants or the Reformers went the other way. And that's why in our 1611 Bible, which every Protestant Bible comes from the 1611 Bible, that's why it's not included in our Bible, because Martin Luther had a beef with the Roman Catholics. And he didn't want anything even closely resembling what they were doing to be in his Bible. Or in his movement. Wittenberg. All right.
So, sorry. So Luther also fell at a time right when the printing press
Right.
was available to him.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was able to mass produce pamphlets and things that supported and rallied a lot of support for what he was doing, because Wycliffe tried to do exactly the same thing as him
Right.
40 or
And wound
50
up
years earlier, and he
being
was
burned
burned
at
at
the
the
stake.
stake. Yeah.
There were many, many movements, many Christian movements that goes all the way back to the first century church that strove against the broader movement of Christianity that was oppressive, that was totally patently unscriptural. But the whole issue with the Maccabees is that early Christians, even to this day, I hold the same position, that the book of Maccabees is symbolic of a reigning Antichrist. All right? And even Jesus made that statement about the abomination that caused desolation.
Right.
It's actually connected to the story of the Maccabees.
If he hadn't gone after it, Daniel said what he said, and then it was fulfilled. It would have been a done issue,
Right.
you know. Yeah.
Absolutely. So why is it not in the Bible? Because we're Protestants.
So to me, the bigger problem is the loss of the book of Maccabees in our Protestant Bible, because I do have my Catholic Bible, which does have the book of Maccabees in there. You lose the historical perspective that grounds the Bible in our historical reality, because everything listed in Maccabees happened in history, and even the secular history.
Now, I
agrees
blame
with
it on minimal education on the
True.
part of the
Agreed.
clergy to the parishioners.
Yes.
Because if you let people really study and learn and understand, then they can, because the rest of the Maccabees is Pegasus flying from one mountain
Right.
to another,
Yeah.
and just
No.
bizarre
Now,
stuff.
let me qualify everything I'm saying here by saying this. I do believe that the 1611 Bible was inspired by God.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
I believe it. I absolutely believe that. The 66 books we have are ordained by God. Are there other writings that's inspired
Sure.
and useful? Of course, but I think this was God's initiative. In order to keep us focused and not look into every other possible inspired book, this was canonized for us. In other words, the 66 books in here is enough.
Right.
I have a theory, and I've shared it before. I'll share it again. The book of Isaiah was found at Qumran, right?
Right.
Yes.
The book of Isaiah was found at Qumran. Was the only book that was found fully intact.
Right.
Right.
And the amazing thing about the book of Isaiah found at Qumran, the Isaiah scroll, is that it is verbatim, almost 100% verbatim, with our book it's
modern.
verbatim with the Masoretic text. It's, in other words, it is not, the book of Isaiah has not been altered over the millennia.
Right.
2 millennia. And so all of a sudden, in 1941, the book of Isaiah is found intact, 66 chapters, making that incredibly profound statement that the book of Isaiah is relevant, it's real, and that the Bible can be trusted. Now, the book of Isaiah is divided into 2 sections, Isaiah 1 to 39
Okay.
and 40 to 66.
Okay.
Right? 1 to 39, how many chapters is that?
39.
40 to 66, how many chapters is that? 27.
Okay.
27.
Yeah.
Now, you take the Bible as it's canonized, the 1611 Bible, you have 66 books, you have 39 books of the Old Testament,
Right.
and you have 27 books of the New Testament. It wasn't orchestrated. Now, the thing about Isaiah and the division of the book of Isaiah is that Isaiah 1 to 39, Isaiah keeps his emphasis and focus contemporaneous to what was happening at that time. Suddenly in Isaiah 40 to 66, it is prophetic. Most of it, if not all of it, is dealing with prophetic issues in the distant future. So Isaiah 40 to 66 is sort of like the New Testament of Isaiah, because it's dealing with the fulfillment of much of what he has written, what he had written
Right.
before, and everything is prophetic. And in those 26 chapters, references concerning Messiah Jesus is clear. References concerning the restoration of Israel, God's commitment, love for the people of Israel, Israel as his servant. And then it's also reflected in those chapters, Isaiah 40 to 66, the reality of the new creation. at the end, the last two chapters, you got to listen to this. The last two chapters of the book of Isaiah are very much like the last two chapters of the Bible, Revelation chapter 21 and 22, because it's dealing with the new creation. Isaiah 65 and 66 deals with the new creation.
Isaiah is the first of the prophets to talk
So,
about it at all.
God is speaking clearly here. He's speaking to us about this Bible. Isaiah 65, 66. The first time ever we see, and the only time in the Tanakh, we see a clear reference to the New Jerusalem, the new creation. And lo and behold, in our Bible, the last two books or chapters is in fact dealing with the new creation.
New creation.
So I am content and I'm persuaded, convinced that this is inspired. Again, are there other inspired books that we can read? Perhaps. But we don't need to, because this is all God determined that we need. The other books are historical. I love the book of Jasher.
Yeah.
I read it from time to time. I do study the book of Enoch. I don't look for inspiration in it, even though the first century church did.
Right.
I read the book of Maccabees, mostly 1 and 2, for historical references and for insight.
Right.
I don't look for inspiration in there, but yet there
I'm
is an
inspired by their
allegorical
faith.
Yeah.
Right.
Yet there is an allegorical significance to the book of Maccabees and to the book of Enoch, as a matter of fact. Go ahead.
But I'm inspired by the book of Enoch, because when I read it and I notice the similarities between Revelation and Enoch,
Right.
it just
You're talking about
adds.
that allegorical poem.
Right.
It's almost a poem that he does at the end of the
Right.
book of Enoch that deals with everything from Adam to the final creation.
Right.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
And so
It's just more evidence, right? More evidence for the truth.
And so, all right, so let's talk about now the book of Maccabees again. Who are the Maccabees, by the way? We need to talk about the Maccabees. Who are the Maccabees? So, Antiochus Epiphanes, who was Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth,
Right.
the fourth of the sons of Antiochus,
Right.
who was given the Seleucid Empire. Now, what happened? Alexander the Great, he covered the known world. He captured the known world. He became a god figure in his mind, and he died. His generals, he had 4 generals, and he didn't, but they divided up his entire kingdom. So you had the Ptolemaic kingdom in the south, which is Africa, and you had the Seleucid kingdom in the east and the north, which covered the land of Israel and Syria and all of Babylon. So these are the 2 kingdoms that we'll talk about. The other 2 are dealing with the Macedonian people and so on. Now, Antiochus Epiphanes, the fourth of Antiochus, he was that little horn that Daniel spoke about, who would come following. Now we'll get to the book of Daniel here in a moment and the relevancy of the book of Daniel. So Antiochus Epiphanes was this horribly demon-driven, devilish ruler of the Seleucid Empire, the Grecian Seleucid Empire, and he oppressed the people of Israel. He and his followers in Israel. Now, what we have to understand concerning the Maccabees is that it was largely a civil war. It was largely a civil war.
They were basically Jews aligning with the Greeks and
the
Jews
Hellenized
not aligning with
Jews
the Greeks.
were saying, we need to surrender to the Grecians. They're way too powerful, and their lifestyle is better than ours. They know better than us. They have their gymnasiums. They have a more appealing way of life. So what if you've got to give up the law, the Sabbath, and eat swine's flesh? So they were the Hellenized Jews. The conflict began between the Hellenized Jews and the Jews who were faithful to Torah, who would ultimately become the Pharisaic movement. So the Pharisaic movement, the basis of the Pharisaic movement, was these Jews in the land of Israel in the 2nd century BC that were saying, no, we're not going to bow down to these Hellenized Jews. And the Hellenized Jews ultimately became the Sadducees, right? And the Sadducees and the Pharisees always contended with each other because it's an ancient conflict, goes back to the Maccabees. Anyway, so the Hellenized Jews, they had captured the religious order of the people of Israel. Suddenly you had a high priest who was not a Kohanim. He was a political plug. And he insisted upon sacrificing pigs. on altars throughout, not just in Jerusalem, but throughout the land of Israel. So he is anti-Torah. That individual is anti-Torah. And so he was resisted a couple of times, and after a few decades, resistance was cropping up everywhere. And then came Mattityahu, who was a Kohanim, he was a high priest. It was pressed upon him to offer up a pig on an altar in Modin. And he said, nope, I'm not doing it. This is not the place for sacrifices. Jerusalem is the place for sacrifices. And there was a battle, and I think he attacked and he killed the person who was, I think the person's name was Jason or something, that was oppressing him and forcing him to offer up the sacrifice.
Right.
And he stood up, and that began the whole civil war, the revolt of the Maccabees. Now, how did the Maccabees come into existence? Well, Mattityahu had a son whose name was Judah. I think he had several sons.
Yes.
And all of his sons were propelled into the whole conflict, the civil war. And Yehuda became Maccabee because he became known as the Maccabee, the hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Because he went on to crush every bit of the movement against them. Ultimately, mercenaries, Greek mercenaries, and mercenaries from the Seleucid Empire, Syrians and so on, began to be commissioned to come in to try and put down the rebellion. And with every effort on the part of the Greeks, it was pushed back. And these Maccabees they became known as the Maccabees. These Maccabees became extremely successful in guerrilla warfare. And it's evident when you read First Maccabee that the hand of God was with them. They yielded to God initially in their conflicts. They yielded to God in every case. And you see what can only be miracles in the battles. They overcome insurmountable odds, and they defeated very large enemies and armies that came against them. And so after a period of time, they managed to recapture the temple. The temple was defiled in Jerusalem, and they managed to recapture the temple and rededicate the temple. The temple was defiled. Why? Because they had offered up a pig on the altar, and there was a bust of Antiochus Epiphanes in the Holy of Holies. And so this was the defilement. In fact, this was the abomination that caused desolation that Daniel mentioned twice. The abomination that caused desolation was twofold: the blood of a pig on the altar and the statue of Antiochus Epiphanes in the Holy of Holies. So, strictly speaking, Antiochus Epiphanes was the abomination that caused desolation.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
He was a person. He was an imperial ruler who oppressed the people of Israel. So that's the basis of the symbolism behind the story.
Full of the spirit of Antichrist.
He was certainly an Antichrist. I mean, he forced the people of Israel to break Torah. He created an incredible polarization. Talk about polarization today. But Antiochus Epiphanes, the type of the Antichrist, I guess you can say that, he created a tremendous division within the people of Israel, a polarization that brought on that civil war. Now, we can see something like that today happening in our own country. So maybe there is an Antiochus Epiphanes. Maybe there is an abomination that has caused desolation. And I think there is. And so what happened? Well, the Maccabees succeeded in cleansing the temple, rededicating the temple. And according to not the actual book of Maccabees, but according to the story that's told, right?
Right.
They had only enough oil for the menorah for
Yeah.
one day, but it stayed lit for 8 days.
Right.
It could be as big of a fable as Santa Claus.
Could be. Could be.
But there's no documentation of that
No,
in the
no,
Maccabees.
no.
Right.
I think that's actually in the Talmud. I think it's actually in the Talmud. I'm not sure. You'll have to check me on that. Nevertheless, we do know in the book of Maccabees that the temple was retaken by the Maccabees and refurbished and restored, cleansed, purified, and again sacrifices were again initiated or reinitiated on the Temple Mount. Now, the key to saying all of that is to say this. The story of the Maccabees, which book is excluded from the Bible, the story of Maccabees is included in the Bible. It's included in the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 8 begins the story of the Maccabees,
Right.
all the way actually interspersed into Daniel, from Daniel chapter 8 to 12. The story of Maccabees, or the Maccabees, is in there, because in that portion of the book of Daniel is introduced the reality of Antiochus Epiphanes and what he would do. In fact, the prophecy of Daniel relative to what the Maccabees would do is incredibly accurate and fulfilled in that sense. The days that the temple would be made desolate for, the relevancy, it's very close. It's not precise to a minute or something, but it's very relevant. It's very much so connected. I think it's 366 days, I think, in the book of Daniel, something along those lines, that the temple would be left desolate for. But then comes the point of the restoration of the temple, where the altar would be cleansed and there would be a resumption of sacrifices. Now, the amazing thing about the book of Daniel and the story of the Maccabees that's reflected in the book of Daniel is that it is so accurate. And Daniel is very clear. He spoke about Alexander, didn't name him as Alexander, but said that a Greek ruler would come with a ram with one horn, and he will destroy the Persian Empire. He mentioned the Persians. So that's clearly Alexander.
Yeah, right.
But then he also talked about the 4 small horns that will come after him. Clearly,
The 4 generals.
the 4 generals. And then he makes mention in chapter 8 about another small horn that comes and has a big mouth, and he makes boast.
Right.
Well, that's Antiochus Epiphanes, because that's the story of Antiochus Epiphanes. He was brazen and bold in his paganism. He came right out and said it. I am an epiphany of God.
Right, right.
That's what his name means, Antiochus Epiphanes. So this is that small horn that Daniel saw in chapter 8 of Daniel. So the point to saying all of that is that the book of Daniel is relevant to the story of the Maccabees. And it does correlate with the reality of the abomination that causes desolation. Now, Jesus, in Matthew chapter 24, makes mention of the abomination that causes desolation, right? And he said, this is the abomination that causes desolation that Daniel spoke of. We know that the abomination of desolation that Daniel spoke of was Antiochus Epiphanes. So was Jesus saying that there would be another Antiochus Epiphanes?
It appears so, yes. That
Maybe
he's prophesying
another
again.
archetype.
Sure.
Or an archetype of a future.
So does the
Right.
Temple Mount need to be delivered and cleansed again? And the answer is yes.
But if you begin to look at what Jesus talked about, the temple again being defiled and the abomination of desolation that would come, the next, or the archetype that Antiochus Epiphanes was, the next person that resembles him is Constantine.
Right.
Right? Constantine is the next global emperor that came upon the scene that began to oppress God's people, to force upon God's people changes in the law, and he sat in the temple of God, the Naos. He did exactly what Antiochus Epiphanes did. So Constantine becomes the abomination that caused desolation. And Jesus was pointing to that. He wasn't pointing to some third temple Antichrist figure that would come.
Right.
Because that Antichrist figure came in the year 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea. You know, Paul talked about the apostasy that was already occurring, but will come in the future. Well, clearly, the great apostasy that Paul spoke about that followed his ministry was Nicaea.
You just destroyed the fantasy of many evangelical
Right.
Christians.
Well,
The savior of Christianity.
you know, contemporary interpretation of the book of Daniel as it relates to the futuristic view of the book of Revelation, the pre-tribulation, pre-millennial concept, is very convoluted. Right? They take the chapters of Daniel 6, 8 and 9 and 11, and they make it into something that it's actually not.
Right.
When Daniel was talking about something that would occur shortly thereafter his own life,
Right.
in regards to the Grecians and this small horn that will come along, and how he will oppress the people of God, and he will press against the king of the south. Who is the king of the south? Ptolemaic. So Antiochus Epiphanes fulfilled what Daniel spoke about. there is an archetypal figure and a typology as well that we can talk about. Allegorically, Antiochus Epiphanes was a type of Constantine who sat in the temple of God, the Naos, and rendered the temple desolate.
Right.
He became the abomination that caused desolation.
Right.
Yep.
Of course, that in and of itself deserves 2 or 3 programs. I mean, to really expand on it.
Sure.
But that's what we believe. So from that perspective, the book of Maccabees is extremely relevant in the prophetic light. It's extremely relevant, and it's something that there should be a Christian platform given to the book of Maccabees. I'm not saying it should be added to our canon, because like we said just now, I believe that this is inspired. Absolutely, I believe this is inspired. Again, the book of Isaiah at Qumran, suddenly, we went over the whole thing. All right. But I believe that the book of Maccabees is relevant to who we are as Christians and should be, again, given a platform in the Christian landscape. What do you think?
Oh, yes.
Agreed.
Absolutely. The difficulty is if you throw Maccabees in, you get the whole Apocrypha that's in the Catholic Bible, and it's crazy justification for strange things.
Absolutely.
But just to remind everybody, didn't we have that famous quote, "What would Jesus do?"
Right.
And you can't have Hanukkah without Maccabees.
Right.
So we have a question, okay? Related to this question, why is the book of Maccabees not included in the Bible? Well, why are Christians not celebrating Hanukkah?
Right.
And what does Hanukkah mean?
Dedication.
Dedication.
Dedication, to dedicate Hanukkah. Now, did early Christians celebrate Hanukkah? Of course they did. Of course, early Christians celebrated Hanukkah. Jesus celebrated
Right.
Hanukkah. And Jim, if you can read that one little reference for us in John chapter 10, verse 22.
At that time, the Feast of Dedication took place at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the portico of Solomon.
Let me say something about Jesus and most Israeli men who did not live in Jerusalem. The only time they will go to Jerusalem is when there's a festival
To be observed.
Right.
a festival to be observed, or there was some relevancy there concerning a festival. Hanukkah was not one of the 3 that the sons of Israel were commanded to go up and
Right.
celebrate in Jerusalem. Which were the 3?
Pesach.
Okay.
Shavuot
Shavuot and
and
Sukkot.
Sukkot.
So these were the 3 most important festivals where the sons of Israel were to go up to Jerusalem and celebrate the feast in Jerusalem. Now, why was he in Jerusalem for Hanukkah? Why was he in the temple in the portico of Solomon at that time? Because Hanukkah was all about the temple.
Right.
Right.
And the temple was in Jerusalem.
I mean, it was a pretty good walk from Nazareth down to
Well,
down to
he lived in the
Jerusalem,
Galilee
or
at
in
that
the
time,
Galilee
yeah.
in general. I mean,
So-
we take a bus, so
But
we're
yes.
there in 3 hours.
Yeah,
But
but they had their own version of a bus, and their bus was a caravan or many caravans
Yep.
of people
Donkeys
that
and
would
camels.
travel
Yep.
down the Jordan Valley up from the road to Jericho, that wonderful road from Jericho to Jerusalem
Yes.
westward. And there was a constant stream of caravans, especially during the festivals. So, point is, Jesus came to Jerusalem. He went up to Jerusalem for the Feast of Dedication. He's celebrating Hanukkah. He's celebrating the Feast of Dedication. We say rededication, but it's the same feast.
sure.
So let's see. The story of the Maccabees, Hanukkah, is relevant to who we are as Christians. Its connection to the prophetic basis of what Jesus talked about and Daniel spoke of, the abomination that caused desolation. That's relevant to us. Early Christians saw it exactly like that. Early Christians were inspired by the Maccabees. Absolutely inspired by their courage.
So it's a great story, right?
The story of Hannah, the woman who had the 6 sons, I think it was, and her 6 sons refused to capitulate, and so did Hannah, and they were all martyred. And the martyrdom of Hannah and her sons became the catalyst of this resistance that stood against evil. So you think of that whole story and you say, wow, early Christians saw this as significant to them because they could relate to being oppressed being forced upon, right? Concerning the law, because the early Christians were Torah observant.
Right.
They were accused unto death about being Judaizers, right? Like we are. You're a
Right.
Judaizer, you know that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
guilty as charged.
Yes.
You know
'cause
you're
it's
you know,
biblical.
you know you're anathema, right? There's no hope for
yes. Yes. And it's poor little us, right? We're so legalistic.
Let's throw the focus back there at them, though, because the reality is that what you're saying is that this prophecy about the one who will go into the temple and declare himself to be God was fulfilled by Constantine in 325 AD.
And the fulfillment is ongoing.
Is
Right.
ongoing.
Because
Right.
he is still very much there.
So
Yes.
it's a done deal.
The abomination of desolation
Yep.
Because Christians associate right away this whole thing of the fulfillment of this being tied in with the climax of the age.
Right.
because we've misappropriated the chapters in Daniel that we spoke about. We've also introduced the futuristic view of the book of Revelation. In other words, everything from Revelation chapter 4 to 22 is all in the future and will always be in the future until Jesus comes and takes the church away.
Right, right.
That's the futuristic view. Now, the view that we subscribe to is called the historic view, which says that yes, from John's place in time, everything in Revelation chapter 4 to 22 was in the future.
Right.
But began to be fulfilled as Jesus broke the
Right.
seal.
Right,
Right.
So the historic view says we're on that timeline.
right.
And Revelation chapter 4 is not when Jesus comes.
Right.
Revelation chapter 4 is when the angel who ministered to John said to him on behalf of God, come up here,
Come up
and
here.
I will show you. In other words, come up here because I want to show you what is to come.
Right.
So that was not the rapture. The futuristic view, the pre-tribulation crowd says that was the rapture. It happened in Revelation chapter 4. Bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. At any rate, so
So
the
in our
people,
historical view, we would say that 5 seals have been broken and the 6th is waiting.
we don't see the full effects of the sixth seal being broken.
Right.
The full effect of the sixth seal being broken is a cataclysmic
Catac-
earthquake, a world extinction event type earthquake. We do see the effects of all the other seals being broken. In fact, today, and I think much of Christianity prefer to be oblivious to this, but martyrdom has skyrocketed
Yeah.
in the
Yep.
world. In Pakistan, we know of we have a sister congregation in Pakistan where the pastor and his family are constantly fearing for their lives. People are being murdered, but it's not on the news. In Pakistan, Afghanistan, how many Christians do
Oh,
you
that-
suppose
oh.
have been martyred in Afghanistan
Especially since the Taliban
since
took
the
over
new
again.
administration?
Right.
Yes.
So it's happening around the world. Martyrdom, that's the fifth seal. And on and on and on.
Yeah,
so,
just because it's not in our own
Right.
backyard doesn't mean it's not
Right.
happening.
right. Martyrdom
coming.
here is not something that we can relate to. Hopefully we never do, but chances are we will see
So-
that unfortunate
Yeah. You know,
reality.
there are many organizations that track this, right? So, Open Doors, Voice of the Martyrs, you know, and if you want to know, they tell you all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there isn't a place on the planet where Christians aren't being martyred.
That magazine right there is probably the most unread Christian magazine
Yeah, nobody wants to hear that
on
information.
anyone's
Yeah.
shelf because
Yep.
we don't want to talk about it.
Right.
The truth is, folks, the book of Daniel is clear. Daniel was relating to something that would happen a mere 200 years after his life. And all that he saw was fulfilled, except for the futuristic fulfillment of the abomination that caused desolation, which Jesus spoke about. And Jesus said, when you see this happen, get away.
Run for the hills.
Because what followed the Council of Nicaea, you know a little of the history. What followed the Council of Nicaea? Incredible persecution upon
Anybody who
early
wasn't a
church.
part of the Roman
Right.
Church.
Especially now, they had a particular problem with Judaizers. Judaizers,
Yeah.
right? Well, they had a problem with Jews,
Yeah.
but Judaizers, we were the most anathema group of heretics from
Yeah.
their perspective, and that's why the Byzantine Church or the Nicene Church literally waged war against believers like us, because we had the audacity to stand upon Torah. We had the audacity to observe Shabbat. We had the audacity to stand with Israel and see ourselves identifying with Israel, not as Israel, but with
Right.
Israel. So we were the worst of the worst
Right.
from their perspective.
So they annihilated our
us.
predecessors.
I'm saying us because I identify with that early church,
Yeah.
the
Right.
Nazarene
Right.
church. I identify with them, and I'm a heretic. I'm a Judaizer. Now, that pressure is still there today. Why is there? Why is that? Why does that pressure still exist? Because Orthodox Christianity has a savior. Orthodox Christianity has a savior, and his name is
It's
Constantine.
Constantine,
Yep.
not Jesus.
Yep, that's the title
Not
they
the
give
real
him.
Jesus.
Now,
Right.
isn't it true that Orthodox Christianity refers to Constantine as the savior,
Savior of
Christianity.
Christianity.
Yes,
And
they
he
do.
did. He saved the world religion of Christianity.
That's why he invented it.
Right.
Right.
Him and the bishops that supported him invented global Christianity. Christianity was never meant to be global. Anyway,
Right.
so you have this incredible picture of Antiochus Epiphanes, number 2, Constantine, the abomination that caused desolation. He's still in the church, in the temple, the Nehos.
Yep.
He's in the Nehos. He's there, and he's very active today. And in fact, I don't want to go off on crazy tangents at this point, but the Vatican today, which speaks for all of Orthodox Christianity, is positioning herself, I said herself, positioning herself to bring incredible persecution upon believers like us.
Right.
Which I'm not going to get into. People have been giving me information. I've been verifying the information. Paperwork that came from Catholic organizations that are concerned about the movement that exists within the Vatican right now that's coming against true believers. And there's a wave on the horizon that's going to sweep across anyone, Catholic or not, that are standing on the Word of God.
Yep.
It's coming. It's out there. That's Antiochus Epiphanes. That's the abomination that causes desolation that Jesus spoke of. And we need to see it. So the book of Maccabees is incredibly relevant. It holds allegorical pictures that's relevant to who we are today. In fact, without going any further, I'll just say that the greatest symbolism of the book of Maccabees as it relates to us is that a group of priests stood up, put their lives on the line, and purified the temple.
Yeah.
The temple today is defiled, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
The Nehos.
Yes.
Who is the priesthood that will stand today and make a difference and purify the temple? Who is that priesthood? If we are
gotta
not
be
that
us.
priesthood,
It's gotta be us
You mean
and
the
people
church,
like us.
right? You
the
mean
church,
the church.
the church, we are supposed to be a priesthood. So is it possible that the ultimate symbolism of the story of the Maccabees, Hanukkah, is that a group of anointed priests will take the strongest position of faith and stand against the abomination of desolation and ultimately purify the temple? Is that even possible? If the story is allegorical, I think it is. The church is supposed to be a priesthood.
Don't you think that what we've done here by establishing ourselves not under a denominational rule and
So I'll bring it to myself personally, and you guys can do the same. The process of the removal of the abomination that caused desolation in my life has been accomplished.
right?
The abomination that caused desolation in my life, my temple is purified. It's
Right.
rededicated
Right.
Yes.
individually. We as a congregation, we're striving to do the same.
Yes.
Right.
We're not far away from that. But I am saying that there's a much broader movement that's yet to come.
Okay.
So there is. I mean, if you look around, there are small pockets of congregations that are very much like us.
Yeah.
You know, I have a couple of Facebook groups that are all, you know, Torah sisters. You know, they're very much like us.
Torah sisters.
Yeah, Torah sisters. And they are calling, you know, for the
They don't wear a habit and all that.
No, they're normal people. and they're calling, you know, they say celebrate the real festivals, God's festivals,
Amen.
you know, come
That's
out
good.
from all this craziness that we see.
That's great.
Yeah. And
That's great.
it's getting to a point where the evidence that the Vatican is that desolation is going to be right in our face.
I know their intent, and we'll see what they achieve, but I think they're greatly weakened by all of the homosexuality and all of the pedophilia that's been propagated in the priesthood.
So I just
You might say that they're weakened, but at the same time, they're strengthened in terms of the world.
right.
Their strength is growing.
Yeah. So I just sent
They're like
Roger.
Antiochus Epiphanes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was one of those people.
Hellenization.
Yeah.
I was one of those people that sent Roger information, and I sent him.
Okay.
I sent him photos from the World Forum that the Catholics just had recently, and who was there, and everything that you and I would call abomination was there,
Yeah, okay.
and proudly on display.
Yeah.
Everything I would call an abomination is on the commercials that I see on television.
That's true too. Yes.
So,
Yes.
so friends, I want to say that the story of Hanukkah is more relevant for us today than ever before, because the temple is defiled and the situation is getting worse. The situation is becoming intolerable. And there's going to be a movement of priests that will be willing to stand up and say, enough. Now, will we pick up swords? No, our weapons are not carnal, but our weapons are mighty for the tearing down of strongholds. So, this priesthood that we are, believers, standing upon the Word of God, will ultimately prevail. The temple will be purified. Antiochus Epiphanes, the abomination of desolation, will be removed. According to Paul in 2 Thessalonians, Jesus himself will slay him at his coming. When Jesus comes, he will put an end to the reign of this Antichrist figure, the son of destruction, the lawless one, who is clearly Constantine, very much alive in the church today. Even though dead, his movement is very strong and becoming stronger. So I want to encourage everyone to consider that the book of Maccabees is relevant. We should not consider it as inspired necessarily, but there are inspiring relevances in it that's important for us as believers, seeing that this is incredibly prophetic and very relevant to where we are today. We are like Judah Maccabee, the Maccabees, that should be willing to take a stand, an uncompromising stand, and lay our lives down, as Jesus wanted us to. If you lose your life, you will find it. If you find your life, you will lose it. So that's who we are, and I celebrate Hanukkah. I celebrate Hanukkah because I am looking forward to the dedication of the Nehos, the living temple, the church.
So that's our program, and Thanksgiving is upon us, and so we rejoice in this opportunity that we have to share the Word of God. We also would encourage you to thank God that He's kept us in life and enabled us to rejoice in this season. The most important thing you'll do tomorrow is not eat turkey and all the stuff that goes with it, but to thank God for His provision. And until next week, shalom.
Shalom.